I'd like to welcome today Peter Keeling, the CEO and original founder of Diaceutics, and Philip White, who's the CFO, and both of them will be taking us through the presentation, and then I'll pick up at the end. So over to you, Peter and Philip, and I'll see you in half an hour or so.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mike. And indeed, welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all of you joining us here for Diaceutics half-year results presentation. I'm Peter Keeling, joined beside me by Philip White. And what I'd like to take you through today is just for those of you who are early holders, you will know a little bit about our story, obviously, but for those who are not, a little bit of a reminder of the marketplace that we operate in. We're excited to have launched our DXRX platform some 8 months ago. We can give you an update on the progress there. Philip will go through some key financial numbers, and then we'll have a little bit of an outlook of what's coming up next at Diaceutics to end today. Amanda, if you move to the next slide for me, please. So Diaceutics operates in the precision medicine market, and that's, as you know, kind of a broad space. The particular corner of the neighborhood that we occupy is our focus primarily on the pharmaceutical industry. They are our clients, and they are increasingly launching a range of smart or targeted or precision medicine drugs. In fact, many of the pharmaceutical industry pipelines are transforming predominantly towards a precision medicine future. But every time they launch a drug, which is in essence triggers a dependency on making sure that patients are tested the right way in order to get access to that drug. And what we've done at Diaceutics is to focus entirely our business model on making sure that the testing of those patients is completely aligned with the need to drive the adoption of the drug. And I'll come back in subsequent slides and explain how that is done through both case studies, etc. Just at a very kind of helicopter level, we have been working with over 30 of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies now for 15 years. So we have a long track record, a trusted set of clients in the space. We have also been building in the background for the last 10 years a laboratory network that we've been using to kind of really change clinical testing in the front line. And also we have been amassing what we believe is the world's largest testing database. In other words, data on how patients are tested in the everyday world, not in a clinical trial setting, but rather how do they get access to these drugs through normal channels. So I'll explain as we go along how those pieces fit together. And if Amanda can move to the next slide, I can focus a little bit more on what is the issue there. So I've mentioned that the pharmaceutical companies are launching these new precision medicine drugs. The problem is because of the way that if you like, the testing ecosystem works, or in most cases does not work, up to 50% of those patients will not get access to that drug, either because the lab cannot run the test or does not offer the test, or doesn't have the technology to offer the test, or the turnaround time for that test takes too long. There are multiple issues which we describe as hurdles, and Diaceutics has focused its business model on removing those hurdles. Again, I'll explain in a slide or two exactly how we do that. And for us, that is, we have observed over many years how the pharmaceutical industry is spending increasingly to solve and remove those hurdles. And so today we see a very clear line of sight to a market opportunity that's around $250 million. That's what pharma is willing to spend to remove these hurdles. However, as a result of more drugs and more willingness to spend, we see that doubling in the next 3 or 4 years. So we're operating in a part of the precision medicine ecosystem where pharma is beginning to understand how important it is in order to create that spending. What we've done, in essence, is to take a business that we've built in a sort of a consulting-esque fashion over 12, 13 years, and convert it into a platform business model. And that platform, which we call DXRX, has been several years in the build. but only 8 months in terms of its actual traction on market. And we report, in essence, what is the sort of the first kind of early adoption curve of that platform in the market. But we're excited to see that the platform allows us to integrate three things. One is the direct relationships that we've had with our pharmaceutical clients and how we truly understand their business need. Secondly, is all the data that we've been gathering over years, some over 400 million patients worth of data in multiple countries, together with a lab network that is represented at least in the top 15 therapeutic markets. So that lab network really supports how we can move testing at the front line. The bottom line for our pharma clients is that if you can remove or gain access for patients to more of that drug faster, there is a very high return to our pharmaceutical clients for doing this. In fact, our own metrics consistently show that for every dollar you spend on removing the diagnostic hurdles, you will gain between $30 to $60 back in more treatment revenue. So there's a real win-win here. It's a win-win for patients, a win-win for pharma. And in terms of Diaceutics, we'll explain how that is driving our own financial business model. If you move to the next slide for me, please. I want to take you on to a case example, but before I do that, I think it's fair to kind of illustrate our own strategic roadmap here. I've mentioned almost in passing, 15 years to kind of build a reputation that we have in the market, build an understanding to create what in essence is a first mover advantage in an area that to many, they did not realize it was an issue and that pharma was willing to spend. So we've done a lot of work over those 15 years, but of course our eyes are focused now on how we can platformize that model, how we can take a model that was gross margins of 55 to 60% and convert it into a scalable platform with margins at north of 70%. We are in our first year. And so what I'll ask you to do through this presentation is to kind of evaluate our progress on, are we promoting the hands-on experience with our clients? Do we see the traction with our clients in this very first year? Are we able to bring all the labs that we've been working with in an offline set of relationships over a dozen or more years? Are we able to bring them online to the platform and engage them? And indeed, are we starting to see the financial benefits of all of that starting to flow already through the financial architecture of the business? And we'll come back later on to talk a little bit about what's next beyond that. So if I jump, next slide, please. If I kind of jump straight into a case example, I think this will really illustrate how we are using the platform today to both engage our clients and to help transform the problem that they have. So here is a case study built around two leading pharmaceutical companies who are collaborating on the launch of a new therapy brand. They've been working on it for 7 or 8 years, and the brand is starting to move to the market at the minute. The problem that was identified and we helped identify for these two clients, actually back in 2019, we provided them with a set of data that illustrated that the test that they would require to be run in all of the breast cancer labs, that the pathologists would have a difficulty in interpreting that test. It was a new scoring system. It required a different level of education in order to run that test. And as a consequence of that, our pharmaceutical clients were going to lose patients and by definition, lose revenue. So they were alerted back in 2019 to this issue. And as we started to work through this year, we conceived a solution, the DXRX solution, which consisted of several moving parts. The first was that through our platform, we would identify 60 of the most influential labs in all of the important markets, as represented by the little map here to the right-hand side. We would collect data directly and through the platform from those laboratories on how well, or in this case, how poorly they were able to interpret the scoring of this test, and that we would measure that as our baseline for this particular program. We would then provide them, sponsored by the pharmaceutical companies, a training that would help their pathologists retrain to be able to interpret this particular test in a more consistent and obviously a quality program. And through that process of engagement and collaboration, we would move their ability from missing 20 to 30% of patients to being able to capture most of the patients that are relevant for this drug. A couple of other components along the way was we describe in Diaceutics the importance of exhaust data. To every one of these collaborations allows us to bring ever more data into our data lake, more granular data, more important data, and all of that, as Philip will explain in a minute, allows us to feed future projects. So where are we on this particular program? We are started it in February. We're reporting here where we were by the end of June. So we had all the labs identified. In fact, there were a couple more pathologists in those labs. So 60 labs, but 80 pathologists in all the countries represented. It was really helpful that our lab network already had those labs ready to go. So it was a relatively quick process for us to bring those labs into this particular collaboration. We have an advisory board. As you know, pharma really benefits from that external scrutiny to make sure that everything is being done with the highest ethical and clinical standards. We've recruited that advisory board. Clients have signed off on that. Our baseline exhaust data has been collected, and we have an understanding where this particular drug and these clients will kind of need to move the needle from how well we can move those clients' business. We've booked all the various training, and we've made sure that our clients have been actively engaged in the process. So pretty pleased with how we're bringing these two clients into an active program. Philip, I don't know whether you want to mention the financial benefit.
Yeah, total contract value for this program is $750,000 running over 10 months. Layering in multiple modules from the platform, as opposed to selling one single product, we're able now to layer in these modules. And it's a good example of the total contract value that we're seeing. We've increased that by 28%. You may have noted an RNS that we released on Monday for another client win, close to $1 million. That's running out over 5 months. Again, a good example of how we're building and layering in the modules that the platform provides to have an increased total contract value. It's also a good example as to how our revenue will build in the future. Our revenue will build in the future on data subscription, and what we call these tech-enabled services, again, allowing for a consistent revenue build into the future.
Thanks, Philip. So if you consider this particular example as an example of one, how many additional projects have we now running on the platform? And if you go to the next slide. So thus far, as we reach the half-year results, we had 15 clients now engaged on projects via the platform. Now, remember, some of those clients have started their journey with the data, as we did back with those two clients I mentioned back in 2019. And some of those clients are now moving, as Philip has illustrated in our recent announcement, into these longer kind of multi-country, multi-module projects. And so really pleased to see that level of engagement on the platform. And what we worked over the last couple of years with lots of groups who had experience in driving adoption of new, somewhat disruptive platforms in the healthcare setting, particularly in the industrial setting. And so our expectation going into this year was that 20% of our business, that's what good would look like. 20% of our business would be run through the platform, 60% next year, and close to 80-90% the following year. So we're thrilled to see that these 15 client projects represent about just over 44% of our revenue as now running through the platform. So really, really pleased to see that. Good solid adoption there, albeit from half our client base at this run rate of the year. Second component is the number of labs. Now, let me zoom out here for a second. Over the last 8 or 9 years, we have databased over 2,500 laboratories that we believe are the key laboratories that will do most of the testing in cancer in all these key markets. And we've been working with those labs in an offline consulting-esque fashion. And we're now moving those labs onto the platform. really pleased to see that, here's kind of representing, after only a small number of months, some 12% of our target labs kind of moving onto the platform. Now, we're obviously choosing the most important labs because, as you would imagine, the first dominoes to fall over are the ones that will support the others coming in behind them. And we now have a run rate of around 8 to 10 labs a week joining the platform. So really pleased to see that. I think we've again demonstrating that we have an understanding of how to move that lab engagement from being an analog engagement, if you like, to a digital engagement, with data being downloaded as the engagement goes on. Collaborations are really important. The one that I've mentioned earlier with the 2 pharmaceutical clients illustrate that as a sort of a collaboration that allows us to move labs up the learning curve or remove the individual hurdle, also allows us to collect the exhaust data that comes out of those projects, and obviously gives our clients that level of visibility that they have not had up until this point. So we have 11 of those collaborations running now through the platform. Again, really great to see that level of engagement going on, showing that we're the engine room of the platform is working. And we've been adding through this time frame, the launch time frame, a series of high quality, let's call them diagnostic partners, organizations who can really support the projects that we're running with our clients, organizations who have a high reputation on their own merit. What this does for Diaceutics is that allows us to avoid building, the key capabilities that these partners have. We're obviously coordinating and then helping them work in the marketplace, but it also keeps our margins high, 70% plus, because we're not having to build those back office services. So great to see those high reputation partners join the platform. And if you Google some of those names recently, you'll see many of those names represented in the public domain. So really pleased with the hands-on use of our platform. Another component part of our business model, of course, is the data. And, I think I said at the top of the presentation this afternoon that we believe that we hold the world's largest testing database. It's certainly the one that is most represented in all of the key countries. It's a global testing database. But what it allows us to do is to look at how testing is being managed at a laboratory level, at a physician level, and actually from the end of this year onwards at a patient level. So we know, for example, how many labs are running the tests, which tests are they running, which tests are they able to run, what components are they using to run those tests. We know at a physician level what those physicians are ordering, what the turnaround time is to get that test result back, etc. And at a patient level, not for every patient, but for a very significant cohort of these patients, we're able to look at their entire diagnostic journey from cough to drug, whatever that might be, which could be 3-4 years. And it allows us to look at whether there are 7, 8, 9, 10 different testing events for that patient. So for us, the granularity of our data is a key differentiator for Diaceutics. And it's certainly recognized by our clients, I think, as a huge benefit to them as they try to understand those testing hurdles. The second component that we're pleased is, again, constantly improving the utility of our data. As we brought it onto the platform from that old kind of, I won't call it analog, it was a digital world, but it was kind of a non-integrated fashion. As we brought it onto the platform, it allows us to increase also the frequency of that data extraction. It used to be quarterly from labs, it then moved to monthly, and we're now starting to process weekly data. So the entire utility of that data repository is enhancing, which are obviously bringing value back to our clients, allowing them to see on an everyday basis exactly what those real hurdles are. And from that is where we kind of build our ability to extract the services from our clients. Market awareness is really important to Diaceutics. It's not good enough just to do this, I think, and create this level of profound clinical change on the front line. We want to tell the world about it. And so we've been using our data to pull out both observations of issues that we believe the world and the clinical world need to know about, and indeed which support our clients. And secondly, it allows us to illustrate how granular and how cutting edge we can be in our assessments. And to put the 9 studies accepted at conferences this year into context, that 9 represents 3 times more than we would have had in any previous year. And that's entirely enabled by having the platform helping us analyze the data through machine learning and algorithms. We're also a lead investigator on an analysis which we've been conducting for several years to illustrate how many patients are being lost, as we describe it, leaking from drug, leaking away from being treated by the drug. And we have said reputationally that we believe some 50% of patients are losing access to the drug. The problem with that statement, of course, is that it is Diaceutics saying that. And what we've done here is to open that up, our analysis, to a broad scrutiny of pharma and other clinical groups that says, don't believe us, come and look at the data, work with us. And so we're creating a collaborative publication, which in our view will be the definitive leakage analysis published at the end of this year. And we'll move from Diaceutics says to the industry finally recognize that patients are leaking away from treatment at a very significant number. So for us, it's a coming of age of the market segment that we've been kind of dwelling and forging in for the last 15 years. Last on this slide, we've obviously continue to focus on the pharmaceutical industry as our core clients. But with the availability of a platform, it does allow you to look at other client types, if you like, that can access that data. And I'm pleased to see that our first significant diagnostic company became a client in the first half of this year. And I think that opens up one of a number of new channels for us to market that I think will be that we'll be reporting out in the future. Next slide, Amanda. And I won't spend too long on this slide because you've covered most of the statistics here. The 44% of revenue this year going through the platform, the number of labs, the number of partners. But I do want to almost pre-trail what Philip will go through, and that is that question of, is the financial architecture of Diaceutics being enhanced here? What is the so what back in terms of our investability and our investor returns? And we're absolutely delighted to say that even though we're only a half a year in here, what we're showing is that we're having an impact on our gross margins, and indeed in terms of the value that our clients see in our business. We're being able to pursue higher price points, and for each of the projects, because we're adding multiple modules on, we're doing much more than we used to do a couple of years ago. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Philip, and I'll come back in a couple of minutes and talk about some things that we're going to be doing in the future. Philip.
Thank you, Peter. Next slide, Amanda, please. I think it's 2 slides. Okay, before we jump into the detailed numbers, I want to take this moment to remind you of the benefits the platform brings to our business model. And as I walk through the little graphic on the right, please keep in your mind the scalability that the platform brings, but also the network effect, such that the more the platform is used, the more powerful it becomes. So walking through that, starting in the top right-hand corner, we are onboarding our clients and laboratories onto the platform. Moving around the arrows, we are carrying out those projects. The project is an example that Peter described of the 2 clients. We're layering in the multiple modules, the data modules at 90% gross margin ex amortization, and the tech-enabled service margins at 74% ex amortization. Again, high margin business, and of course we're earning dollars from what we're selling here. That activity on the platform generates data, patient healthcare data that we acquire from laboratories, data that we acquire, Peter has referred to exhaust data from the programs themselves, and data from laboratories to actually join the platform. We could describe that as a global ingestion tool for healthcare data, hugely important. This real world evidence is hugely important. And that data is transformed via our IP, our intellectual property, into key insights. And this is ultimately what we sell to our clients, and increasing those insights. And this very much fits with our overall strategy to add more pharma clients and to add more drug brands within those pharma clients. Again, Peter touched on 39 clients, and we have 53 drug brands on our books currently. And in addition to that, looking to the left, the additional benefits of the platform are we are transitioning to a subscription revenue model, again, higher quality earnings model. The platform is truly scalable. We've touched on those high gross margins and the self-serve nature of the platform. And we're adding additional modules that provides opportunity, number one, for our clients in that the additional value that we're providing for our clients. And secondly, for us as a business, as we extract more of that share of wallet that our clients have. There's efficiencies within the data capture and the ingestion tools we are using. Peter touched on moving laboratories from an offline position to an online position, and there are efficiencies there. There's also a pull factor we see as more laboratories join the platform. There is an increase in the number of laboratories wanting to join the platform, so it's a pull factor towards the platform. And finally, there are some short to medium term upside revenue blocks or channels that we are targeting. One is this is non-pharma in data companies, laboratories, and we've just won our first diagnostic company contract, which we're very pleased about. Next slide, please, Amanda. So zooming out for a moment and looking at some of the key financial KPIs, we're very pleased with the performance in the period as represented here. And if we work from left to right through the KPIs, our revenue has increased in pound terms by 13%. That was against a very significant foreign exchange headwind. Our revenue actually increased 24% on a constant currency basis. Gross margin is improving from 71% to 74%. We'll go into what's moving within the cost of sales line there. EBITDA position slightly improved on prior year. That represents a continued investment in certainly sales and marketing to support the sale of the platform. And our closing cash position has decreased, and that naturally due to the continued investment. We invested 2.7 million in the platform in the period. Again, a strong cash balance. We have more than enough cash to continue to invest out in the platform. And it is also our intention, and one of the reasons we listed is to represent a strong financial balance sheet for our clients as we move to ever increasing total contract values, and like what we just issued in our RNS, $1 million contract. And next slide, please, Amanda. So looking at some of the detail behind some of the numbers, and I'll refer to the little table on the left as I walk through the points on the right. We've touched on the revenue performance increasing by 13%. You'll see that in the table, 24% on a constant currency basis. And what's underpinning that is the additional modules that we've launched in the platform. We're selling more modules to each client. And it's such that our total contract value in the period has increased by 28% in dollar terms, something that's reflected within our pipeline of business. I'm very pleased with that. 44% of our revenues, Peter's touched on this, again, very pleased with the adoption of the platform ahead of our 20% expectation. And we're beginning to see that showing in the financials, and that will continue. A point here on seasonality. Historically, the seasonality of our business was 30% of revenue was recognized in H1, 70% in H2. And that typically represented a risk for the business, primarily in H2. Very pleased that with the launch of the platform, there's a more consistent buying pattern from our clients, such that the seasonality is more representing a 45-55 and revenue split from H1 to H2. Key regions reporting growth. US is our biggest region, growing by 20%. EU, an important region for us, has rebounded by 82%. That's against a very restrictive lockdown position in H1 last year. APAC's an important region for us. We are supporting brands for our clients that we have worked on previously in the US and EU in that region. And we continue to invest in that region to support those indigenous healthcare companies that will be launching product in the opposite way. Looking at our gross margin, you'll see in the table, our gross margin increased from 71% to 74%. Again, that's after amortization of the platform. So within that number, we have an 11% drag on our gross margin. That's because of the amortization of the platform. If you look at the next line on the table, we see our gross margin excluding amortization, very much creating that labor efficiency within cost of sales to a 15% increase in gross margin. Again, that offsets against the 11% amortization and ultimately results in an increased gross margin. Very pleased with our margin. Administration costs, a lot going on within administration costs as we move from our consulting model to our platform model. But to call out some of the additionality within that administration cost, moving from 3.8 to 5.1. We've invested in our BD teams, marketing, and introduced a sales commission structure to support the sale of the platform. And legal and compliance, again, important. We've overhauled our terms and conditions to our clients, and also global data compliance is hugely important. And then more materially, there is a foreign exchange gain reported last year, which has reversed into a £100,000 loss. Tax credits for the period represent £500,000, which is consistent with the prior period having a £600,000 catch-up credit within there. And that's flowing to an EBITDA of £300,000, similar to last year. Again, very comfortable with that as we are tracking to a £2 million positive EBITDA for the period. And before I leave this slide, important to note, we have a tax debtor on our balance sheet of £2 million, 1.5 million of which we will receive in cash terms within the next 6 months. And next slide. Again, happy with the strength of the balance sheet and the investments we made in the period. And the table on the left represents the intangible assets at cost. I've also noted the trade receivables and the cash position. The little chart below that represents what we actually, how much we invested in the key intangibles in the period. So overall investment in intangibles in the period, as I discussed, was 2.7 million, 1.4 million of which went into the platform, which you'll see from the table below is down from 2 million. Having launched the platform, we are investing in 4 key modules, which Peter will touch on in a second. We've continued to invest in our data. We've invested £1 million in our data, up from 650,000 the prior year. Yes, we are adding those important patient records, but we are also ingesting more granular data and more timely. So I think Peter pointed out we were ingesting data monthly. We are now ingesting data weekly, and that's of huge value to our clients. A new item on the intangible list is our diagnostic deductive pathways, or DDPs. We've invested 200,000 in our DDPs, and that's creating structure and algorithms around that patient journey. Again, providing value for our existing modules and also for future product development. We've improved our trade receivables, reducing from 4.2 million to 3.5 million, resulting in net cash from operations, positive 1.3 million. Offsetting that with our 2.5, the total cash outflow in the period was 1.5 million for H1. Again, just to round out this slide, Strong balance sheet position, good working capital management, and key investments made on time and on budget.
Thanks, Philip. And I'd like to spend just a few minutes just with a little bit of an outlook, and we can obviously open up for questions. If you can move on to the next, I think it might be the slide after this one. Thank you, indeed. So, look, when you zoom out, I think the assumption that we've made at Diaceutics is that the future of diagnostic commercialization is outsourced, digital, and scalable. And we've built really the platform that we believe fits very much into that key need. And we're bringing a multi-sided marketplace here. We're bringing a platform play to really solve for a problem that is denying patients access to treatment and is beleaguering pharmaceutical companies' return on investment. And obviously we're informing all that with data. So our feeling is that as the market tips towards precision medicine and personalized medicine, we have built the right product in the right place. If you move to the next slide for me, please, Amanda. In terms of the timing, our assumption, our working plan here is there's a 3-year adoption curve, moving from that old consulting model where we built our reputation, our trust, our experience, and moving that into a platform business model. You can see the margins starting to flow through there and the efficiencies into the business. Next year, it's all about creating that visible impact to our clients. For them, I think this year it's, let's engage with Diaceutics through the platform. Next year, it's what did we do? Did we deliver on the promise of changing clinical care at the front line? And finally, that opens the door for us to reach into those organizations and say, let us be a ubiquitous part of your go-to-market strategy. So a very clear roadmap for myself and my team, and I think we're well down the track on that. Last slide. Actually, second last slide. Things to look out for. We do have additional modules being launched. I won't go into the detail of these here. I will say that on we did a Capital Markets Day broadcast. I think it's available on our website, and we illustrated some of the new additional modules that are there alongside 1 or 2 of our pharmaceutical clients who spoke on our behalf as to the relevance of Diaceutics in the business. So if you want to go back and look at that, it's there in the library for you to access. That was done in June of this year. So by way of summary, and I'll hand back to Mike, very much, next slide for me, Amanda, very much I delighted with those early indicators of traction with the platform. We understood the space well, we've interpreted the needs of the space, we believe, and I think we're starting to see the benefit of that right product being in the right place. It's all about timing, and I think if you have been following the fortunes of the precision medicine marketplace, you'll understand that what we're observing at the minute is a tipping towards a precision medicine future. So for Diaceutics, I think we're in the right place, right product, right time. Thanks very much indeed. Handing back to you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter and Philip. We've had a few questions coming in, and I've got a few here as well that were submitted previously. I'll start with the ones on the screen here. First up, can the pharma companies that use your platform put any restriction on the further use of the data generated on their projects? And will that affect your business model to reuse or sell that data?
Yeah, that's a super question, very smart question. I think the way that we have set these collaborations up is what I would describe as it's the use of data for good. So what we are working with our clients on is that this data is obviously to their benefit in terms of kind of moving the labs along, but after all, they are working this through our platform. So the data usage is open for us. Having said that, if you know if there are key components of these data insights that are proprietary to our clients, of course we will respect that as part of it. But the overall data flow is about understanding what's right for the patient, and I think there's a general acceptance that that data is open for us to use. And hopefully that answers that question.
Have any of your clients so far restricted use of the data that's been put on the platform?
No.
No. Okay, thank you. Second question, having seen this presentation previously, these were good half-year results. Why is the share price so relatively flat therefore, and what more is being done to highlight the current success and potential to the institutional investor market?
Indeed, I appreciate that question. I think what we observe at the minute is there is a level of some older founders in the business. I say older founders in the business who have retired and who have been kind of selling down shares in a somewhat unmanaged way. And we do believe now in collaboration with our broker Stifel and Capital Access Group that is now being managed appropriately. So that's one in terms of that kind of share management. Secondly, I think to the articulation of our story, and you are right. I think we've observed that there was a difficulty in understanding the Diaceutics story. We've actually, dare I say, kind of changed the team supporting us, and we have a new PR agency. We have a new broker. We've added a second broker to that. And indeed, Philip and I have spent a big chunk of this week using the benefit of the Capital Markets Day that we did back in June and the presentations that you see today as our a kind of approach to reset, if you like, that investor communication. So I believe that we now have that right kind of forward-leaning approach into the market. And like you, I think the question is, when will the market see the value in Diaceutics? Hopefully we now have all of the component parts in the market to do that. Philip, do you want to comment on that? Or
no,
that's yeah.
Okay, thank you. One of our members here is new to the company, and he appreciates he can now see what you do. But could you please also explain why is there a gap in the market that you are trying to exploit? Maybe if you could just touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think people have often said this to me. Why aren't others doing this? A lot of this has come from my own experience. I used to work at GlaxoSmithKline many years ago, so I understood the pharmaceutical model. I then started a diagnostic company many years ago prior to Diaceutics, and it was really hard. And I could see how relevant testing was to the pharmaceutical industry, but the fact that they were really operating in two different silos. And there's lots of reasons for that. Pharmaceutical products have a very high margin, low volume. Diagnostics sometimes are very low margin, high volume. So you have an oil and water situation ongoing. And I think the conception behind Diaceutics was there is such significant value to everybody of testing patients better. Everybody on this call will have their own experience of bad patient testing and the use of biopsy as a threatening end of world concept to many of the patients around us. So diagnostics are not well managed, I think, particularly in relation to how patients are getting access to these new drugs. So along come the pharmaceutical industry, having spent years and years investing in these new drugs, only really to find when the drugs are on market that they weren't getting access to patients. And that is where Diaceutics came in. We were walking into those conversations and saying, look, we're here to help. We didn't have the platform at that stage, but we could help with the data. We could help with creating some integrated programs and services that we did on a bespoke basis. But finally, with the platform, we feel that we have that sort of comprehensive service offering and data offering that allows us to take control of what we describe as a broken ecosystem. So I feel as if there is an awakening going on in the marketplace. One anecdote that is probably worth sharing, it's actually an older anecdote, but it's still relevant today. Some 20 years ago, Roche launched a drug called Herceptin. It's a targeted drug, and it was probably one of the first really true precision medicine. It was dependent upon a test called HER2. And Roche drove Herceptin, became a $6 billion drug. They were very pleased with it, as indeed they should, prove that precision medicine was good economic medicine. But the issue was they were losing patients through testing. And so we did a kind of a reverse engineering way back then. And we determined that Roche were losing somewhere between $3 and $5 billion worth of revenue over those same years as a result of bad testing. And we spoke to our friends at Roche and said, look, we have this information. We think it's valuable to get that out into the public domain. Their response was, we're happy for you to publish it. We think your number is wrong. We think the number is closer to $5 to $7 billion of lost revenue. And you would expect Roche, those of you who are investing in healthcare will know Roche have an intimate understanding of the testing and indeed the treatment world. But other pharmaceutical companies have had to kind of go through that bad experience themselves before they realize how financially dependent the success of the drug is upon testing. So I think we're sort of growing up a little bit as a segment to really understand what the problem is, and we're starting to spend appropriately in solving for that problem. Key to all of that is when you want to spend and you want to remove it, who do I rely? Who do I trust on to really remove those hurdles? And indeed, that's where I think Diaceutics comes in. I'm hoping that we've built the right product, right place, right time. You've heard me say that, but it's critical. I think that as the market tips, we're there to say is, let's take control of that. Let's help you.
Okay, thank you. But just a subsidiary question on that is, if you, as you say, have the first mover advantage in this particular market opportunity, what would stop others from catching up with you quite soon?
Yeah, let me take that, Mike. We do have a large moat around our business, okay, but if they could go through a lot of money on it, of course they could catch up. But let me describe what that moat is in 4 different elements. The first one is our data. We've been collecting data for 8 years. That data is hugely important. It maps, it's a global patient data set, really describing the whole patient journey. It's also real world data, what's happening right now in the market, and that's hugely important to our clients to understand what's happening between Germany, France, between the US, and what barriers are there remain to testing. The second one is our laboratory network. We have a relationship with 2,500 laboratories. That's been built up again over 6-7 years. A lot of people hours in that sort of building that relationship, and we're now moving those laboratory relationships onto the platform. We currently have 400 onto the platform. Again, think about the platform with 2,500 engaged laboratories. That's of huge strategic value to our clients. We have 39 of the top pharma clients on our books. We have a trusted relationship with them. We've delivered for them over many, many years. We've managed people. You cannot just phone these people up and have that level of trust and engagement. And finally, the method that we've developed and the intellectual property and algorithms that we create around the data, really focusing in on the DDPs that we've developed. That has taken many years to develop, and it's, the data is one element. It's transforming it into those key insights which are so important to our clients, and that's done via the algorithms and the method that we have. So those are the 4 principal moats around our business that we can see.
Okay, thank you. The subsidiary question was, are you the biggest generator of the relevant data, which I think you alluded to during the presentation. How far ahead do you think you are in terms of the next nearest holder of that type of data?
Well, our view is that we have a 3-year, I think, a 3-year lead now. It does include many of the moats that Philip alluded to, but you must remember here that healthcare data is not, you just don't flick a switch and all this data starts to flow. You have to kind of manage the extraction of that data. You have to bring it in, you have to ingest it, you have to combine it with other data sets. And ultimately you have to produce insights, of which we're using machine learning and algorithms, which again is all part of the training. So there is a time lag to do all of that. typically, even if you identify a new data source, you could be a year before that data is sort of ready to flow into our data lake in a way that we can use it with our clients. So there's a long lead time here. So our working assumption, to the very precise questions, I think there's let's say a 2 or 3 year lead. And one big thing that differentiates us isn't the fact that we're providing the insights, we're doing it in a unique way, but the fact that we're providing it on a global basis. I think that's really important. Lung cancer in the United States is the same lung cancer in Germany as it is in India. And I think what we're being able to do is to integrate those data sets in a way that really help our clients understand how they bring those new smart drugs into those multiple markets at the same time. So again, another component of years and years of investing in building that global database.
Okay, thank you. We've got somebody here who wants to go into a little bit more detail on the database and your Nexus platform. Just wondering, he says, is the platform currently focused mainly around scoring immunohistochemistry data, e.g. of tumor biopsies and the like? And is it adaptable to the newer emerging precision medicine tests that are based on genomics and so on?
Brilliant
question.
Could
you just elaborate on that?
Indeed, that's Kevin. It's a brilliant question. Actually, one of the things that I think we called right from the very get-go, Kevin, was it's not about the test technology, it's about testing. So we know that testing manifests in multiple different technologies. Some of it's immunohistochemistry test, increasingly it's genomic tests, some of it is imaging. And I think we'll also see some digital algorithms being thrown in here in the future. We're starting to see some of those come through to the market. So for us, our technology embrace into the data lake is all of that. All of those different testing modalities are being collected and identified. And what's really unique about that, Kevin, is we're able to see not just the fact that an individual patient level may be used, may be subject to testing on an immunohistochemistry test for some tests, but we'll be using a next generation sequencing test for something else, or there will be complementary imaging going on in there. So we can see that full gamut of test technology. Our expression is we're agnostic to the technology, we're focused on the testing. And I think that allows us to introduce everything from point of care testing all the way through to very, very sophisticated and centralized testing laboratory. And it's great to see that combined data set in the data. Hopefully that answers.
Okay, thank you. Just on stuff that was submitted beforehand. Question here about, again, to do with the testing, really, I suppose. Apologies, I'm just reading through, trying to get my head around this. In terms of you've alluded to it already, that the test labs around the world do not necessarily operate to a very standard template, even though the test may be apparently standard. Interpretations of results vary from one lab to another and so on. And therefore, the data that's being fed into the platform can be quite variable, I guess. And you've already alluded to the fact that you're putting a lot of effort into trying to effectively standardize across all the labs so that you're comparing apples with apples. So what degree is that going to act as a drag or undermine the confidence in the data that the platform contains? And how much is that becoming a kind of a cost item for you going forward?
Again, that's a great question. So look, we've identified 6 repetitive and pernicious hurdles which deny patients access to drug through testing. One of those hurdles is the fact that labs have what's called an interlaboratory variability. So, lab A might score the same patient test a 9, and lab B might score that same patient test a 6. The first patient, the lab A would say this patient is positive, lab B would say this patient is not positive. So it's very meaningful from a point of view that you address this issue. Labs are not obviously themselves setting out to score a 6 or a 9. They believe that they are following the instructions of how to run that test. But such are the differences and very slight variances, everything from temperature to what's going on in the room to the steps that you use, will and can change the outcome of that test. So the best way to address that is to compare lab to lab. So it's the same patient or it's the same patient type. And what our data illustrates really clearly is that there is a global problem with interlaboratory variability. Even when you launch a new biomarker, or even if it's a biomarker that's been around for 10 or 15 years, what we can see is that labs have a drift from what we believe is the right standard. We can also see in that who are the best labs, and we can help the labs that are underperforming to move up. And I think it's a real value proposition to the labs. We're not there to judge them. We're there to help support closing that gap. And part of our modules and everything that we're doing through the platform is to do just that. A good lab for us is a lab that is A, willing to measure where it is on its variability, and B, willing to close that gap because we're bringing, supported and collaborative services to help them. And we have yet to find a lab who turns around and says, I do not want to be the best at what I do. So it is a big problem. It's a great question. And I think from our point of view, our data illustrates clearly, and to put this into context for the audience today, we've already measured, we could be losing up to 20% of patients because of that interlab variability. 20% of patients in some labs will not get onto drug. That's a significant problem, and therefore it's worth identifying and plugging. And I think we're on that.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Yes, we're all out of time, and there were a couple more questions. I'll try and get those to you. If you could send us back an answer, maybe on email or something, we can get that posted on our website. No problems at all. But thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. Interesting business, and I wish you well with the platform rollout, and look forward to hearing more news in the future when you get your next results out. So thank you for spending the afternoon with us.
Not at all. Thanks. And thanks to your audience today. Have a good day.
Thank you.
You
Bye-bye.